All right. The communication sector. This one was fairly straightforward and simple. Take a look at my notes real quick. We're currently in Rogers Communication. Um, Better beta, better return, better alpha, just better all the way around. Verizon is the other option here. I am curious as to why, though. It's actually been a couple of days since I've looked at this. Let's see. So this is the return portfolio that we're following, and Rogers Communications made the return portfolio, so that's why we're looking at that. So that leads me to believe that Verizon was better, a better return maybe uh, over the last uh, over the last 12 months. Let's take a look here. Yeah, and this is really interesting too. Because following Rogers, they have talked a lot about how COVID has affected their business, negatively anyway. But there's also been some positive impacts as well. So Rogers, unlike a lot of their American counterparts, is just now really rolling out the unlimited phone plans, and so that's definitely taking, their revenue is taking a hit because of that, because they're not, bringing in as much money. The other thing that they discussed was a loss of roaming revenue because there's not a lot of travel going on. I think one other thing that was not mentioned in the earnings call, but one thing that I think is also a factor is that Canada has closed their borders for quite some time now. And so there's not a lot of people going in there and then purchasing those Rogers SIM cards to use while they're in Canada, right? So, what portion of their revenue stream that is, I don't know. It must be small. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have discussed it. Um, but it is a factor though. It is something to think about. The other big factor here is that Rogers Communications, and this is a lot of the reason why we got into this company, is that they own sports teams. They have a ownership in the Toronto Raptors, the Toronto Blue Jays, as well as the Toronto, I believe it's Maple Leafs hockey team. They also have a sports stadium. There in Canada as well. And so a lot of that has been kiboshed because of COVID. So, my thinking is just looking at the returns for the sector, the fact that Rogers is really like right there with Verizon, even with the loss of revenue that they've had because of the sports franchises, is amazing. It really is. Let's take a look at what that looks like here. So this is Verizon, and you can see they did lose a little bit, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be for the same reasons that Rogers communicated, which is, when COVID came down, a lot of these phone companies, were the whole "we stand with you" thing. There was a lot of discounts given. People lost jobs, and so a lot of times the first thing to go is that cable package or is that second phone line, right? Companies, even though they are moving more towards telecommunications as far as, online calls and things of that nature, their office lines may be off. They may have canceled or may not have added any office lines like they would have before. And so we're going to see a drop off in revenue across the sector, I'm sure, without even looking at all of it. And same thing has happened with the bottom line as well. I've talked before about how important it is that when you have a loss in revenue to make that up by decreasing your expenses. And you see that they've done that. They've decreased their expenses by a little bit, but not quite enough to grow their bottom line, their net income. So you still see a little bit of a loss there. Rogers Communications, by comparison, has also lost a little bit of revenue. They also, you know, did what they could, I guess, to reduce cost, but again, not enough to offset the net income. And you know, their net income has been kind of rocky over the last 3 years. You know, you see there's a fairly large increase from 17 to 18, but then there's a slight drop in 2019. And so, you know, that's going to be indicative of the fact that they're not just a communications company. You know, they also own sports franchises. Now, my thinking is that sooner or later, you know, all this stuff is going to come back. And so I think we're going to see a big resurgence in entertainment and in sports teams and stuff like that. So again, you know, the fact that Rogers Communications is second in the sector with all these other, you know, quote unquote phone companies says a lot. I think there's a lot of upside potential there. Sports teams have started playing again, but they're not bringing in the same revenue they did before with the actual games happening in the stadiums. I'm sure that the TV and the sports packages are still selling. But, you know, again, a little loss of revenue because they were closed down for at least a couple months, I believe. So, you know, again, this is a very simple, straightforward decision for me. Rogers Communications has been really good to us, even though we are down in our position. Let me show you kind of what that looks like here. I have the utilities pulled up. Yeah, I do. Get rid of that. Location here. All right, not a lot to choose from here. But you see, dividend is not horrible. And let's just get Verizon and Rogers up here. All right. Dividend not horrible, but you can see the price difference, right? So from 54 down to 46. We got in, I believe, at about 51. And so we'll be purchasing more shares at the 46 range, which is going to put us at about a 48 cost average, roundabout, in our position. So we still have a little while to go to start seeing some profit, but like I said, I think there's a lot of upside potential in Rogers. Canada is a more interesting marketplace versus the U.S. just because there is not as much pressure competition-wise, and there's always this potential of bringing in more customers. I mean, there's a lot of people moving to Canada for various reasons, but there's also persons living way outside of the city, and if you can get services to those people, they will gladly pay for them. Canada is rolling out 5G. They have more phones coming in. Rogers, along with everyone else, discounted their phones during this whole COVID thing. So at some point, we're going to see that drop away. And so the phone prices are going to stabilize. And then because of, like I said, just now, they're going to the unlimited packages, we'll start to see that stabilize as well. So maybe the earnings won't be as jumpy as they have been over the last year or so. And And that's really about it. I can kind of go through the rest of these, but it's pretty obvious for me. The portfolio is pointing towards Rogers. We're currently in Rogers. And again, there is just a lot to be said for the company in general. Alpha is much better, which is why we got into it in the first place. And even the beta is better than Verizon. The 3-year average return is better than Verizon. The volatility is less than Verizon, indicative of, again, of a Canadian phone company versus a U.S. company. So I think we're good there. But again, we'll continue to monitor this. We are looking forward to getting at least to even with Rogers at 48. And if we can get back to 51 or 54, that'll be even better. And I'm sure we'll continue to get that consistent dividend while we wait.